Tonight, after intense backlash, top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer walking back what many saw as a threat against two Supreme Court justices appointed by President Trump.
I shouldn't have used the words I did, but in no way was I making a threat.
Wednesday, at an abortion rights rally on the steps of the court, Schumer saying this.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Okay, so what I'm about to tell you is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever seen happen in American politics. A sitting Supreme Court justice, someone who serves on the highest court in the land for life, stood up and walked out while President Trump was speaking, just got up and left, on camera, in front of everyone. And the reason this happened will tell you everything you need to know about where we are right now as a country. Trump was at a live televised legal event in Washington, and he started claiming that the Constitution and the courts do not apply to him if he decides otherwise. He was essentially saying that as president, he can ignore judicial oversight whenever it becomes inconvenient. And a Supreme Court justice looked at that, heard those words coming out of the president's mouth, and decided that staying in the room would be endorsing it. So they walked out. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. This is unprecedented. Supreme Court justices do not do this. They are trained from day one to be above the political fray. They do not make public gestures. They do not engage in visible protest. They write opinions. They issue rulings. They let their legal reasoning speak for itself. But this justice apparently decided that what Trump was saying crossed a line that required a visible response. And the message could not have been clearer. What the president is saying is so offensive to the Constitution that a member of the court charged with protecting that Constitution could not sit there and listen to it. The video has been replayed across every network. Commentators are calling it a carefully choreographed red line moment. Legal analysts are saying this signals that parts of the judiciary now see Trump's rhetoric as a direct attack on the document that gives their institution legitimacy. When you insult the Constitution in front of a Supreme Court justice, when you claim that your presidential power supersedes the framework that makes their job meaningful, you are not just making a political argument, you are attacking their reason for existing. And this justice responded in the most dramatic way possible, short of actually saying something publicly. And this walkout did not happen in a vacuum. It came while the Supreme Court is already grilling Trump's lawyers over the legality of his emergency tariffs. The justices are openly skeptical of Trump's claims that he can impose sweeping economic policies by declaring national emergencies.
The president's authority to impose tariffs on any international country. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is live outside of the Supreme Court and joins me now to talk about it. Katrina, all right, here's where we're looking. Catch us up. What have we learned so far?
Hi, Vlad. Well, first of all, I'm out in front of the Supreme Court, and there is a long line of people here who are waiting to get into these arguments. This is such a big case that it's really drawing a crowd. But so far, there has been a lot of pushback. John Sauer is arguing on behalf of the Trump administration right now.
They are asking tough questions about the limits of presidential power. They are pushing back on the administration's legal theories in ways that suggest real concern about executive overreach. So when Trump then goes to a public event and essentially says the Constitution does not apply to him, that lands differently. That confirms the worst fears of justices who are already worried about how this president views the limits of his office. Lower court judges have been raising alarms for months. Federal judges across the country have been speaking out about how the Trump administration is undermining the judiciary. They say the administration treats courts as enemies rather than as a co-equal branch of government. They say constitutional norms are being violated. They say the rule of law itself is under threat. And now a Supreme Court justice has joined that chorus, not with words, but with action, with a walkout that spoke louder than any opinion could. This also connects to the broader pattern of conservative judges breaking with Trump. Just recently, a Reagan-appointed federal judge resigned his lifetime position specifically to warn that Trump is an existential threat to democracy. Judge Mark Wolf gave up one of the most secure jobs in America because he felt morally obligated to speak out. He accused Trump of weaponizing the Justice Department. He said Trump uses the law for partisan purposes while sparing friends and donors. And now we have a Supreme Court justice making their own statement through the dramatic gesture of walking out during Trump's remarks. What we are witnessing is the judiciary, including judges appointed by Republican presidents, reaching a breaking point. They are the guardians of the Constitution. That is their entire reason for existing. And when the president repeatedly says that the Constitution does not constrain him, when he claims he can ignore courts and oversight whenever he wants, they cannot simply stay silent. Some are speaking out through resignation letters. Some are speaking out through harsh opinions from the bench. And now one has spoken out by physically leaving the room while the president attacked the document they have sworn to protect. So in this video, we are going to break down exactly what happened at this event and why the justices' walkout is so significant. We are going to look at how this fits into Trump's escalating war with the judiciary. We are going to examine the Supreme Court's growing skepticism of Trump's emergency powers and tariff policies. And we are going to talk about what it means when conservative judges are breaking ranks to oppose a Republican president, because that tells you something profound about where we are as a country. Let us get into it. All right, so let us really dig into what happened here, because the context is crucial for understanding why this moment matters so much. The event where this walkout occurred was a live televised legal forum in Washington. These kinds of events bring together judges and lawyers and legal scholars to discuss important constitutional questions. Supreme Court justices sometimes attend. They do not usually speak about pending cases, but they participate in discussions about legal history and constitutional interpretation. It is meant to be a dignified professional setting where serious people discuss serious issues. And then Trump showed up and started making claims that fundamentally reject the entire premise of constitutional government. He suggested that his presidential power stands above the Constitution itself. He said courts and constitutional limits do not apply if a president decides otherwise. He was essentially articulating a theory of presidential authority that has no basis in American law, a theory that says the president can do whatever he wants and nobody can stop him. This is not how the American system works. This is not what the founders intended. This is not what the Constitution says. But Trump stated it publicly as if it were obvious and uncontroversial. The justice who walked out apparently could not stomach it. According to reports, they stood up, looked toward the cameras to make sure the moment was visible, and left the room. This was not someone ducking out to use the restroom. This was a deliberate statement, a carefully choreographed gesture designed to communicate that what the president was saying was unacceptable. The message to everyone watching was clear. A member of the Supreme Court believes Trump's view of presidential power is so dangerous to the Constitution that they could not remain in the room while he expressed it. Now let me explain why this is such a big deal. Supreme Court justices almost never do anything like this. Their entire professional culture is built around maintaining the appearance of being above politics. They do not endorse candidates. They do not attend partisan events. They do not make public statements about political controversies. They speak through their opinions, through the legal reasoning they put on paper. When Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg made some critical comments about Trump during the 2016 campaign, she faced intense criticism from across the legal community for violating judicial norms. Justices are supposed to be seen as neutral arbiters, not political actors. So for a justice to make this kind of visible public gesture, to walk out of a room while the president is speaking, represents a complete break from how Supreme Court justices normally conduct themselves. It suggests that this justice believed the situation was so extreme that normal rules no longer applied, that staying silent and neutral in the face of what Trump was saying would itself be a form of endorsement, that the Constitution they have sworn to protect was under such direct attack that they had to respond visibly. And this walkout comes at a particularly charged moment in the relationship between Trump and the Supreme Court. The justices are currently wrestling with major cases involving Trump's use of emergency powers. The tariff case that was being argued involves Trump's claim that he can impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods by declaring a national emergency under a statute called IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. During oral arguments, the justices, including conservative justices, were openly skeptical of the administration's legal theory. They asked pointed questions about whether this was really an emergency. They questioned whether Congress intended the statute to be used this way. They pushed back on the idea that the president has unlimited discretion to reshape the American economy through emergency declarations. Justice after justice raised concerns. Even justices appointed by Trump seemed uncomfortable with how far the administration was pushing executive power claims. The questioning suggested that the court might impose real limits on Trump's emergency powers. And that context makes Trump's public comments even more provocative. He was essentially telling the court, while they are actively considering these cases, that he does not believe their rulings actually constrain him, that he views the Constitution as optional, that courts are obstacles to be ignored rather than co-equal branches to be respected. Lower federal judges have been raising alarms about this for months. Across the country, judges are speaking out about how the Trump administration approaches the judiciary. They say the administration treats courts as enemies. They say constitutional norms are being violated regularly. They say the rule of law is under sustained attack. Some judges have written opinions that go beyond the specific cases before them to express broader concerns about executive overreach. Some have given speeches or interviews warning about the dangers they see. The judicial branch, usually the quietest branch of government, has become increasingly vocal about its concerns. And then you have the judges who are actually resigning or breaking ranks publicly. Judge Mark Wolf, the Reagan appointee who gave up his lifetime position, wrote an essay in The Atlantic accusing Trump of weaponizing the Justice Department and posing an existential threat to democracy. He urged Americans to oppose Trump through every constitutional means available. Other judges appointed by Republican presidents have issued harsh opinions criticizing the administration's legal theories. The pattern is unmistakable. Now, the judiciary is in revolt, not partisan revolt, but constitutional revolt. Judges who believe in limited government and separation of powers are watching Trump claim unlimited power, and they are pushing back. The walkout at this Washington event is the most dramatic expression of that judicial resistance to date. A Supreme Court justice, even the highest judicial officers in the land, making a visible public statement that Trump's constitutional theories are unacceptable. The gesture will be debated and analyzed for years. Some will say the justice violated norms of judicial neutrality. Others will say the situation demanded extraordinary action. But what cannot be denied is that a member of the Supreme Court felt compelled to visibly reject what the president was saying about the Constitution. That tells you how serious this has become. Okay, so let us break this down into what you really need to understand about this walkout and what it reveals about the current state of American constitutional government. Because this is not just one dramatic moment, it is a window into a deeper crisis in the relationship between the presidency and the judiciary that could define this era of American history. First point, the walkout was a deliberate constitutional statement. This was not an accident or a personal matter. The justice looked toward the cameras. They wanted the moment captured and broadcast. They wanted the public to see a member of the Supreme Court rejecting the president's claims about constitutional power. Legal analysts are calling this carefully choreographed. The message was intentional. What Trump is saying about presidential authority is so offensive to the Constitution that a guardian of that Constitution felt compelled to visibly object. That kind of deliberate public gesture from a Supreme Court justice is essentially unprecedented in modern American history. Second point, Trump's comments crossed a line that even conservative jurists cannot accept. What Trump said was not normal political rhetoric that judges disagree with. He claimed that the Constitution itself does not apply to him if he decides otherwise. He said courts and judicial oversight can be ignored at presidential discretion. This is not a conservative theory of executive power. This is no theory at all except raw authoritarianism. Conservative legal philosophy has always included respect for constitutional limits. The originalists and textualists who dominate the conservative legal movement believe in a constitution that constrains government power. When Trump rejects constitutional constraints entirely, he is not articulating conservative principles. He is rejecting the entire framework that conservative jurisprudence is built upon. Third point, this connects directly to pending Supreme Court cases where Trump's power is being challenged. The tariff cases currently before the court involve exactly the questions Trump was dismissing. Can the president impose sweeping economic policies through emergency declarations? Are there limits to executive power? Does Congress have a role? The justices are actively wrestling with these issues, and many seem skeptical of the administration's expansive claims. So when Trump publicly says constitutional limits do not apply to him while these cases are pending, he is essentially telling the court their ruling will not matter. He is signaling contempt for the very process they are engaged in. The walkout can be seen as a direct response to that contempt. Fourth point, this fits into a broader pattern of judicial resistance to Trump. We have lower court judges speaking out about constitutional violations. We have Reagan-appointed judges resigning to warn about existential threats to democracy. We have harsh opinions from judges across the ideological spectrum criticizing the administration's legal theories. We have conservative justices asking skeptical questions during oral arguments. The judiciary, the branch of government designed to be above politics, is increasingly alarmed by what it is seeing. The walkout is the most dramatic expression of that alarm, but it is not isolated. It is part of a growing judicial revolt against a president who openly rejects judicial authority. Fifth point, the political and legal implications are enormous. The video of this walkout will be replayed endlessly. It will become a symbol in the debate over Trump's relationship with the Constitution. Supporters will attack the justice for violating neutrality. Critics will praise them for defending constitutional principles. But beyond the political debate, there are real legal implications. Every pending case involving Trump's powers now exists in a context where a Supreme Court justice has visibly rejected his constitutional theories. Every ruling against the administration will be seen as part of judicial resistance. Every ruling for the administration will be scrutinized for whether the court is capitulating to pressure. The walkout has changed the dynamic. Sixth point. This raises profound questions about what happens when a president rejects constitutional limits. The American system depends on all branches of government accepting the basic rules. The president executes the laws, Congress makes the laws, the courts interpret the laws. Everyone operates within the Constitution. But what happens when a president says he does not accept those limits? What happens when he claims he can ignore courts and constitutional constraints whenever he wants? The judiciary can issue rulings, but the executive branch has to comply. The courts have no army. They depend on the other branches respecting their authority. When a president openly rejects that authority, when he says the Constitution does not apply to him, what can the judiciary actually do? The walkout was a gesture, but gestures alone cannot enforce constitutional limits. So where does this leave us? In a genuine constitutional crisis that is playing out in slow motion? We have a president claiming essentially unlimited power. We have a judiciary increasingly alarmed and pushing back through every tool available to them, opinions and rulings, and now dramatic public gestures. We have pending cases that will test whether the courts can actually constrain presidential power. And we have an administration that has signaled it may not comply with rulings it does not like. The walkout was a powerful moment. It captured something real about how members of the judiciary view what is happening. But it also highlighted the limits of judicial power. A justice can walk out of a room. They can write opinions, they can issue rulings, but they cannot force a president to respect the Constitution if he chooses not to. That enforcement ultimately depends on political processes, on Congress using its powers, on voters making their voices heard, on the broader political system responding to constitutional violations. The justices who walked out and the judges who are speaking out and resigning are sounding an alarm. They are using their platforms to warn the American people that something unprecedented and dangerous is happening. Whether that alarm leads to action, whether the political system responds adequately, that is the open question. The judiciary is doing what it can. The rest is up to the other branches of government and ultimately up to the American people. I will be back with more updates as the Supreme Court cases proceed and as this constitutional confrontation continues to unfold, because this is not over. The tariff cases will be decided, other cases challenging Trump's powers will be heard, and each one will be a test of whether judicial authority means anything when a president openly rejects it. Stay tuned.